Hello and welcome to More Bible, the official podcast of Reformation Covenant Church. In Jesus' high priestly prayer, he asked that his Father would sanctify his people in truth, and then affirmed, "Your word is truth." So in seeking to be a means to answering our Lord's Prayer in each episode, pastors and church officers will take questions from church members and provide answers from the Bible so that our people can grow in a deeper, more faithful understanding and application of God's Word to their daily lives. I'm Brewer, the associate pastor here at Reformation Covenant Church, and today we are releasing part 2 of the conversation that I began last week with Jonathan Shaw on how Christians ought to think about artificial intelligence. This interview was done remotely, and so I apologize for the poor audio quality. We're still figuring out how to get good audio on remote interviews, but I hope the following conversation that concludes last week's discussion is helpful and edifying for you as you continue to think about how to use technology well to the glory of God.
I appreciate how you're framing wisdom, first of all, within the realm of the transcendentals. It's really good. For those of you who don't know, the transcendentals that he's referring to, he mentioned truth, beauty, and goodness. They're called the transcendentals because they transcend humanity. They transcend the created order and are, in fact, aspects of God that the created order, there are various ways of talking about it, but that basically are defined by God, by God's character, by God's nature. And we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the conversation this seems to be where we're going, because AI does not have access to those transcendentals like someone created in the image of God does. They're not going to be able to exercise wisdom because of that. What they're doing is they're taking the values that we give them as their sort of transcendent reality and only working within the confines of those. That's really good. In terms of people, so on the one hand, we just talked about people who are largely negative of AI, and as you said, pretty much any technology. You know, they share some instincts. If you're skeptical or suspicious of technology in general, you're going to be certainly suspicious of AI. What about, how do you think as a Christian people ought to think about the techno-optimists who are just completely beholden with the future? You know, there's kind of a wild example that some people may not be aware of, but there's this whole movement called Christian transhumanism, where we are in the AI is there. They call themselves Christians, but the whole point of AI is that we are moving beyond humanity, that we are on to the next step of how I'm not even sure how they would say it. Evolution or something, but it's not evolution. It's more about transcending. There's sort of a Gnostic thing where we are meant to transcend our human limitations, and this is the means by which we do it.
Interesting.
So how do you think we ought to, and not necessarily the Christian transhumanists, but just the people who are very, very, very optimistic about AI? What's a Christian way of thinking about that approach and responding to that approach?
I guess there's several different possible answers. One is there are obvious misuses of AI to keep in mind. And somebody that's truly optimistic about AI that far has forgotten some of those. Like, imagine what the Chinese government can do with AI. This is not a good thing. But in terms of like being the next step of human evolution, everything that we do changes what we can do and who we are. And so there is some truth to it. Like the invention of the hammer has allowed people to make things a lot faster. And the invention of the car has allowed us to get places a lot faster. And AI allows us to solve problems a lot faster. So there's a lot of reason for optimism. But the real core of the people that are thinking that it's going to be the great promise of AI that people like to imagine, when you have somebody that's really optimistic about it, then the promise is that AI is going to solve all of our problems, and we're going to have this society where all economic and medical problems are solved by AI, and it can be the politicians, and we can just be, happy little utopian dwellers. And AI doesn't solve any of that. Like the real fundamental problem with humanity is we're fallen. AI doesn't touch that. AI just reflects that. It doesn't help us be unfallen. So I think that side of it is bogus. The other side of it of AI solving all of this for us, well, AI relies on us to understand truth. And I think that actually will limit what it can do even in scientific fields. Scientific and mathematical, like you would imagine AI can blow us out of the water in chess. You would imagine that AI should be able to blow us out of the water in math. The reason it can do chess and not other fields is because you can put really tight limits on chess and say, this is a good move. This is like, you won this game, you lost this game, figure out what it takes to win a game. When you circumscribe the problem completely, then AI can sit there and crank away on it and come up with solutions. Trying to do problems in the real world are more and more fuzzy, so it's harder and harder to do that. But you would think that it would be that math would be the next to fall, and then science would fall, and pretty soon it's going to solve all of these problems. But I think the fundamental limitation is it still needs to rely on us for truth. It will be able to solve math problems, but it doesn't know what a good math problem is. So mathematics, sometimes, often in mathematics, the great advances are because we came up with new axioms, and that opened up a whole new field of math. You come up with an axiom, that axiom is determined to be self-evident by a majority of humans. The AI can't judge that, which means it can't come up with new mathematics. It can't come up with new axioms, which means it can't come up with new fields of mathematics. People have to come up with axioms and say, here, what do you make of this? Well, then the next question is, what's an interesting problem? It may be that I can hand AI a problem and say, here, prove this. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it does problems and proves problems like that mathematicians have been struggling with. That is actually a reality in today's world, that it can do that kind of thing. And yet somebody handed it the problem. Somebody looked at this problem and went, this is an interesting problem. And this is worth the time to solve. In order for AI to get better at solving problems, it's got to come up with its own problems. In order for it to truly exceed our abilities, it has to come up with its own problems. And I'm pretty sure it will come up with ugly problems because it has no sense of beauty.
Yes.
And those problems aren't going to be useful. And sure, it can solve them like nobody's business, but what good was it?
What good was it? That's really interesting. The idea that you said it doesn't know what a good math problem is. A math problem that has value in solving. It's not able to begin. It's not able to introduce those sorts of questions. It reminds me a lot of what C.S. Lewis talks about in Abolition of Man, and the uniquely human aspect of value making, of making value judgments, and how that really is the thing that sets us apart as creatures, is we ascribe moral value to things, or maybe not moral value, but within the confines of a field, the things that are good, right, and true to do. And Lewis's whole point is that if we lose that, we actually become less than human. He talks about imps walking around in trousers. That's what we become. And I guess maybe someone who's coming from Lewis's perspective, I think that book is very insightful. And for those of you who are listening, if you've not read Abolition of Man, you need to read it. It is maybe the most prescient book of the past century. And it's just a remarkable piece of writing from Lewis. But some concerns from people may be that if thinking and reasoning are subsidized to AI, we are going to lose that value making, the human capacity to make value judgments, because we're not going to be thinking about them. We're exporting our thinking to AI. I'm curious how you might respond to something like that. If that's something that we should, constantly be aware of, the AIs can't do this. And so we as humans constantly need to be reflecting the fact that God has given us the capacity to make value judgments. But how do you think about that?
So I'll give you an example, actually. I'll just respond to that with an example. Monday night, I had a problem that I was trying to figure out. Challenging math and algorithm design problem. And I spent a lot of time with doing what's called vibe coding. Vibe. I don't know if you've heard of vibe coding. Vibe coding basically means you talk to AI and you have it write code for you.
Okay.
And it's actually pretty good at writing code, but so I was iterating on the algorithm with it and having it generate this code and running it and going back and forth with it. And together we came up with something that I don't know that either of us would have come up with on our own. And it's most of a pretty good solution to it.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, I went back and started looking at it and went, it forgot what it was doing here and actually made the solution vastly slower than it needs to. And there were parts of what it was drawing on that I don't actually know. And it's time for me to go and learn all of that so that I can rewrite the solution from scratch and make it actually work the way I want it to. So this kind of comes back to it's extremely useful, but we always remain the evaluators. And the challenge of being the evaluator is we have to know more than it does. Otherwise, you can't evaluate it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you are in a level of very sketchy trust if you have it do the problem for you and wipe your hands off and walk away and go, well, that was good. All done.
Mm-hmm. That seems to put people in sort of a tenuous place in terms of trying to know more than a supercomputer that can. Yeah.
Well, you don't have to know more about everything.
That's true.
But whatever it is that you're trying to do, you have to be the expert in.
Yeah.
And where you trust it to be the expert, you better catch up to it, or you're going to likely find yourself in trouble.
Yeah, it's like using Excel. You can use Excel to do a whole number of things, but if I did a bunch of Excel when I was working in education administration, and I had to know my numbers very well to accurately assess how Excel was distributing the data. And If I didn't, it was terrible, and I would submit a bad report and just wasn't reliable.
That's exactly where things are with AI.
Okay. So the question, I think one of the last questions I have in terms of thinking about this Christianly, and this is maybe this won't strike people as an inherently Christian question, but I think actually it is in some ways. But it seems to me like the term artificial intelligence is a little bit of a misnomer in terms of what is actually happening when we're using these tools. It's not intelligence like we think of in terms of creativity, novelty, sort of the things we've been talking about. It seems to me more like it's a big calculator almost. It can recognize text and it can calculate things, but it's not exactly intelligence as we think of human intelligence. How do you think there's something there? How do you think we ought to, what the term artificial intelligence is? Where is it misleading, and where is it a helpful way to think about what's going on?
So if you put a clean separation between intelligence and wisdom, and pull all of wisdom out of intelligence, then I think the term is fine. But I think that often colloquially, intelligence includes some of wisdom. And so then if you're using it to think of it that way, then you're going to definitely find, wait, this is not really matching up to what's happening.
Right.
Maybe in the nomenclature of our discussion, artificial rationality would be a better
rationality. Okay.
Yeah. But it is surprising though how much it does know and understand. Like I said earlier, it's sitting there predicting one word at a time, for a text generator. And you would expect that to come up with practically total nonsense almost all the time.
Yeah.
But they do these experiments. Have you ever played? There's a game called Reverse Eye. It's a simple board game. Well, they gave the thing moves of Reverse Eye. Here, put a stone here, put a stone here, put a stone here. They didn't give it any of the rules of Reverse Eye. They just said, here's all the moves. And then the question is this a valid move given the board position? And there's way too many board positions for it to memorize, but it started figuring out all the patterns and rules of the game, and they could actually probe it and tell that it had learned the rules of the game by looking just at the moves.
Oh, wow.
That being the case, you got to figure if it's looking at the text, how much is it learning about the actual world just by looking at sequences of words? It's got a world model. It can figure out. It's got this idea of objects. It's got this idea of locality. It's got all of this sense about our world and how things interact. It's got some kind of a representation of all of that internally just by looking at sequence of words. So it's gotten vastly smarter than we give it credit for if we think of it as a pattern recognizer.
Yeah. The thing that comes to mind as you're talking about that is, some people have seen that very famous AI generated video of Will Smith eating spaghetti from 4 years ago or whenever it was, 3 years ago, and it was terrible. I mean, it had a lot of errors. And there were pictures from it last year, AI generated pictures where people had extra fingers or all sorts of problems going on. And only recently it's the quality of the video it's almost, you can hardly distinguish it from real life. Which is obviously some of the concerns, things like deep faking and what some nefarious ends that it can be used for. But its ability to generate that kind of quality is incredible. It really is incredible. So it has obviously advanced to a way that it's not just recognizing accurate representation in the sense of what does a human body do, how many fingers does it have, what does the chewing mechanics look like, but it can actually present something that is quite lifelike in its appearance. And I find that very interesting. And I also have some pretty deep problems with it, at least concerns about, as a pastor, about what that opens the door for. With most of our sins, we are thankfully limited by our abilities, our access, or our creativity. But if we can import our corrupt nature and desires to a thing that can basically do anything, that's going to open up a world of temptation, at least. That is, I think it's hard to overestimate how devastating that could be.
And there's a whole bunch of websites out there offering AI girlfriends and all of that kind of stuff. And you can imagine where this is going. And I think this comes back to my first comment when you asked me how we should think of AI, which is it's a tool and it's not a person. When people start thinking of like the person that's like, well, I'm lonely, so I'm going to go get an AI girlfriend, that's already going to lead to deep trouble right there.
And I'm curious, do you think it is a tool, but it's not quite the same thing as if someone is like in love with a hammer? Like, let's think about this a little different. It's not just, and that's obviously, that is sort of ridiculous and even difficult to think about what that would mean. But it's not just that you're loving a tool like you would love a computer or love a hammer. It seems to be more like the AI is actually just selling you on yourself. Like the AI generated girlfriend that I'm sure, I don't know how it works, I've not tried it out, but I'm assuming that what they do is they ask questions about yourself and it gets to know you as you talk with it, and essentially it's just feeding you what you want. And so you're becoming, as your relationship with this thing is completely determined by what you like, what you think, and you're just closing in more and more on yourself rather than having external feedback, external input from people.
I likewise have not tried it. My guess would be that it's more or less that. There are other ways that they could go with it, but fundamentally, you're coming into contact when you are interacting with this thing with the creators and not directly with God. And a man gets married and his wife is made in the image of God, and he is confronted by God with aspects of himself that he doesn't like. And this causes a lot of friction in marriages. Well, the AI girlfriend can be shaped in such a way to give you no contact with anything you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because you're not in contact with God. And the result is, like you said, you end up with people that are crazy narcissists
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and still lonely.
And still lonely. Yeah. Yeah. Their problem has just gotten worse, even as they've tried to tend to it by improper means. For you, as you've worked with AI, what are your major concerns? Like, what are your worries about how AI, the effects of AI?
One of the things I find concerning. So I guess the concern of AI is always the bad actor behind it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a bad actor behind it, then you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You can have bad users also, though. I mean, that's not totally. You can have the guy that starts talking to AI, and you get a lot of these kinds of people that start talking to AI and end up believing that they are the savior of AI or some leader of some weird cult. Or like people have gone absolutely bats from this kind of thing.
Yes.
But the bad actors that are out there, you get governmental things. I mentioned China. Like this AI can be used very badly for surveillance and shaping people's lives. I expect China will. I would hate to be under AI in China.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then in America, I would say one of the things that you're likely to see a lot of is I'm surprised we haven't seen so much of it yet, but scams are going to be on the rise from this.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine for just a second an AI that goes around, finds here's Britton Brewer. Okay, pastor, RCC, friends, grandma. Okay, here's a video of him talking to his grandma. I'm going to call Britton's phone number that I found, and I'm going to impersonate his grandma and talk about his life and say I need help for such and such, whatever. How long? Like you have a 5-minute conversation with you. If it doesn't fool you today, it will be very soon before it can.
Mm-hmm.
Like so that makes this have to be more suspicious of all the interactions we have with people because it could be impersonating someone. And that's a really unfortunate aspect.
Yeah.
And we haven't hit it yet, but I don't expect it to be too long before we start seeing that kind of thing all the time.
Yeah. And that's a common concern that people talk about, the abilities to create impersonations or fabricate things that that impugn your character or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're kind of moving. I think people have talked about moving into an age where we really won't be able to believe any sort of thing that's presented to us as a means of valid testimony, because we might see something. I saw on Twitter a video of a bunch of rabbits jumping on a trampoline, and it looked like it was real. And I thought for a second that it was real, and it was that's sort of a silly example, but it won't be long before they can make what looks like a security camera footage of somebody doing something, and you're not going to be able to tell if it's true or not.
I think that the reason for that is we have this notion of objective truth being something that is impersonal and true whether anybody knows it or cares about it. And the concept is half true. It's true if God knows about it and cares about it and thinks it. And every human on the planet could not think it, and that wouldn't make it less true. However, truth is a person. Christ says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And as we've gotten away from truth being a person, we've gotten away from truth being mediated by people and have gone to more and more impersonal ways of finding truth. And so you get online and you find the random crackpot that says everything under the sun, and he is just as plausible as your pastor, because what he says, I don't evaluate based off of who he is. I evaluate it purely off of what he says and all the other crackpots that I can find that support him. So I think what my personal bid for how to solve this problem is that we need a social media setup when we want to get on the internet and understand anything. We need a setup where you have trust networks. I know Britton. I know who he is. I know he's a solid Christian. I know his family. I know what he believes. And he knows this guy. And this guy, he trusts for all of these reasons, and that guy trusts this other guy. And when that guy over there says, this is what's going on with COVID vaccines, I'm going to listen.
Mm-hmm.
But when some random person I know nothing about says this is what's going on with COVID vaccines, I'm like, well, I have no idea what viewpoint this guy is coming from, what agenda he has behind it. I have no idea.
Yes.
So I think we need to make this idea that because truth is a person, we can establish chains of trust.
Mm-hmm.
But if that chain is broken anywhere, then I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah. And we have actually, for the listeners of the podcast, Bo and I have talked about that. We see some of that in terms of the podcast phenomena, where people just listen to podcast to podcast to podcast, and they know nothing about the person actually giving the podcast and producing the content. And authority, testimony, those sorts of things are actually depersonalized in a way that they ought not to be. I appreciate that. I appreciate that, what you're saying. For people who are interested in thinking more about AI from a Christian perspective, I know that you read and interact with stuff that's probably well beyond the accessibility level of most people. But do you have some resources that you might recommend for people to use, to go to think more about this?
Well, at risk of sounding self-serving, I recommend the book that Michael and I wrote. I have not found a lot of stuff that is Christian thinking on AI that I've read and gone, that's really a good take on this. And I think that's partly reflective of the fact that AI has been so shaped by atheists. And so I've been in, as I said, I've been in the field for, 20 years, in industry for longer than that. And out of that time, aside from my current job, like before I started working at a Christian company doing AI, I ran across maybe half a dozen people out of all of my travels that were Christians doing AI. And most of them just kind of keep their head down and do their thing. So I think that is a lot of why there's so little Christian thinking about AI, because there's so few people in AI that are Christian.
Do you think that's because just the STEM fields in general don't have a lot of Christians, or do you think there's something unique about AI?
I don't know. It wouldn't be surprising to me at all if the biases that we've talked about have steered Christians away from AI in a lot of ways. If you have Christians looking at this and going, well, this is trying to make a God, or this is trying to take away our position that God has given us, this is going to ruin the dominion mandate, like only we are rational beings, this is never going to succeed, or, this is a lot of people are dispensational, are pre-mill. And you get all these people that are pre-mill. If I was pre-mill, I wouldn't touch AI with a 10-foot pole, because if I make a tool, I can't predict who's going to use that tool and what they're going to use it for. And if the world is getting worse, I should expect that by and large, bad people are going to put it to worse and worse uses. So that would steer me out of the field entirely. I happen to be post-mill, which means that vastly more of the uses over the course of history are going to be positive uses than negative uses. It's going to be used for the glory of God far more than it is going to be used against it. So making tools is a great bet from somebody with an optimistic viewpoint, but most of America does not have that, I think.
And this is an example of where eschatology does affect just our day-to-day lives, how we think of even just the tools that we use and technology that we have. Well, Jonathan, I want to be sensitive to your time, but this has been a very helpful conversation, and I think our listeners will benefit from it a lot. So thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. Thank you for your good work. And perhaps we'll have you back on to discuss this topic again, depending on if people have more questions or want to think more about it.
Well, I really appreciate the invite and the opportunity to talk to you about it. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has been. I've enjoyed it. And we could talk for a long time
Probably
because
true.
I have lots more questions. But for the sake of our podcast, we've done enough. So for those of you who are listening, that's all the time that we have for today. We hope that this discussion has been helpful for you. If you have more questions about this or any other topic, please feel free to text me or Pastor Cogbill or any of the other elders, or you can email us at morebible@reformationcovenant.org. Again, that's morebible@reformationcovenant.org. Until next time, remember to make best use of the time God has given you for His glory and the life of the world. Goodbye.